Call the Cocalico Township Supervisor meeting for August 6th. To order, please rise and pledge allegiance to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please silence your cell phone if you haven't. I'd like to do a couple of announcements. The August 6th board meeting was advertised last December. Executive session, we had an executive session Wednesday, July 22nd at 9 a.m. to discuss personnel matters, and then we had another executive session August 4th at 9 a.m. to discuss legal matters. Okay, meeting minutes for our last meeting, July 16th. Any additions or corrections to that as presented? Motion be approved the Thursday, July 16th Board of Supervisor meeting minutes as presented. I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Any comments or questions? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carried. Thank you. Mr. Lee.
Good morning.
Good morning.
First item on the agenda is the Carriageville Phase 3 and 4 preliminary final subdivision plan. And there is a representative from Landmark, Joe Eisenhower, in attendance. I'll give a little background and then maybe turn it over to Joe to highlight any items he'd like to discuss. The last board meeting, or the board meeting of July 16th, you had approved the 2 remaining waiver modifications associated with the project that were pertaining to stormwater. You had also discussed the HOA, or the maintenance of stormwater facilities, and passed a motion relative to requirements for the HOA. There was other project-related discussion. Since that time, we have issued an updated plan review letter dated July 31st with a few minor technical items and some administrative items outstanding. As part of that review, we had also reviewed a construction cost opinion, which would be necessary to identify the required financial security for phases 3 and 4. And we had issued correspondence acknowledging the updated cost opinion amount as satisfactory. So as far as first item for consideration tonight would be, or this morning rather, would be, to acknowledge that amount. We could also have further discussions on other remaining items as identified in the letter, and consider any types of actions necessary. So maybe with that, I don't know. Maybe highlight too that there was a pre-construction meeting held out on site between the last meeting and today to coordinate all kinds of construction activities as the project proceeds with the authority and all the necessary utility service providers, the township and Landmark and their contractors.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's rare to say good morning in this type of setting. I wanted to come and chat with you all, if possible, about the motion that was made last month regarding the creation of the HOA. And I'd like to discuss the ownership and maintenance of that basin and some thoughts that we have. Our preference remains, and we believe it's our right not to be required to create an HOA. So if the board is up for it, I'd like to revisit that issue if we can this morning.
I think it doesn't hurt to talk.
Okay, great. I like conversation. Sure. I heard a number of issues that were raised. I was able to watch the video. I was unable to be here. I apologize for that. It seems as though the dominant concerns are clarification and responsibility as far as making sure that property owners are aware of who owns the basin, who's supposed to be doing what. That's the first concern I heard. The second one was saddling the costs for maintenance on sold property. So At the meeting last week, or last month rather, Tony had mentioned a community by the name of Rosedale. And I'm sure we could probably come up with a small handful of places throughout history where this wasn't handled properly. And I wanted to better understand how it might have gone sideways or where the disconnect might have been. So what I did was, working with legal counsel, we went back through and reviewed the title and all the deeds for Rosedale. And I went all the way back to the very first deed that transferred Lot 2, which is the fairly large basin, significantly larger than we're talking about at Carriage Hill. Conveyed Lot 2 to a private owner, which was the Johnson family. And that deed goes back to 1999. And on that deed, I found that there was absolutely no reference to any stormwater management facility or any O&M responsibilities, and O&M being ownership and maintenance. There have been, we're now on the 6th owner based on our research of that lot in particular. So I know that there's been concerns voiced about things getting removed from deeds or lost during transfers or throughout history. How does that get carried forward? It was never actually carried forward in Rosedale. The recorded restrictions that they had identified at that time talk about aluminum fencing and wash lines, but there's no reference whatsoever to the basin itself, Rosedale being the community we're talking about. We have mud on our hands as well in the township with clarification of who owns what basins over in Stony Point. What I've been trying to do is see where we handled it improperly in the past and where we could handle it better going forward. And I know that it was mentioned last meeting that DEP requirements have changed in 20 years. We don't disagree with that 100%, but we also feel as though the legal process has changed as well, and we feel as though we can clarify who owns this basin and make sure that everybody in subsequent deeds and transfers has a clear title to say this is yours, whether you like it or not, and you have to choose whether or not you're going to buy this lot. So what I'm proposing, and I'll say again, is that remain on a single owner, lot 11, and that in the deed, embedded in the deed itself, there's a specific reference to the stormwater management basin so that there's no lack of clarity on who owns what. And then that we record companion instruments, which are restrictions and ownership and maintenance clarification of duties that are wet signature. The buyer is well informed at the moment when they sit down, and that if it takes us 15 different buyers until we find the right party that wants a lot like that with that type of infrastructure on it, so be it. That's a market risk that we're willing to take. That we feel it's more appropriate for us to take a risk from the marketability standpoint of one lot as opposed to 35, which we feel as though putting an HOA on a community, well, it's been done in the past, and we're no stranger to it. There's a noticeable hit that we take on our lot values when we have an HOA in place. It's a real thing. So what I'm suggesting is, again, that lot 11 be sole ownership, and that the deeds be doubly reinforced, and I'm more than willing to work with anyone at the township, including the solicitor. Ultimately, I think our solicitors, my attorney and your solicitor, need to talk before anything final gets determined, regardless. But we have language in the deed itself, embedded in the deed, stormwater management basin. You know you're going to get this basin. Companion instruments that are recorded clearly articulate what it is that you are owning, what it is that you take upon yourself as a burden of a homeowner when you take that lot. And those are all recorded, so future title work, there is no ambiguity. So that was the first concern I heard. And those are my thoughts on how we can address your concerns regarding clarification of who owns the basin. The second concern is the maintenance issues that were raised. Undoubtedly, a doomsday event where that basin gets blown out would be costly. It'd be costly for an HOA, it would be costly for an individual homeowner. The basin itself has been there for 20 years in an actual ENS condition. It was never converted to its final form. And when I say final form, that means we remove the temporary riser. That means we plant the appropriate seed mix so that the right grasses are growing so that that basin functions properly. So for 20 years, that basin sat in the condition that it is today. And I don't have an encyclopedic reference of all major storm events, but I know that at least in 2011, Hurricane or Tropical Storm Lee rolled through and flooded out the whole state, really. August of 2018, we had an event that some classify as a 500-year storm, where we had 8 inches of rain in 1 hour, and again, flooded out the entire mid-state. And the basin has held. There was no significant blowout, there was no significant damage or malfunction. What we're proposing now is to actually take that basin from its existing temporary ENS condition and make it final, but do so by bringing it up to the current DEP standards of construction, which is actually to improve the basin beyond what it currently is constructed to be. That includes clay lining. We're proposing an 8-inch clay lining under the entirety of the basin. We're going to be regrading the swales. We're going to be constructing the bottom of the basin and the outfall in such a manner that actually meets DEP and current stormwater management ordinance, which is something we were required to do, and we recognize that from the moment we put a pencil to paper. And apologies that I'm messing with my mask a lot. It's kind of the sign of the times. So the basin itself, the maintenance of this basin, what that homeowner is going to be assuming when they take ownership of it, is going to be to mow the grass twice a year, inspect it after a storm event for trash, or for an issue, if an issue does occur. So if you're willing to do that yourself, it's your own time as the homeowner. If you're going to bring somebody in, it's maybe $1,000 a year that you're going to be incurring in the cost. The cost to set up the HOA and to manage that HOA and to maintain the accounting and the legal requirements that you're obligated to maintain as an HOA, you're going to exceed the actual maintenance costs annually by just running the HOA versus what it's actually burdened to take on. And then in the event that this doomsday event occurs where the basin blows out, the HOA is just going to be as strapped to come up with the repair cost as an individual homeowner. But there you're going to have 35 different people or a board fighting amongst themselves on what actually has to occur to restore that basin to its functional condition. And we believe that is more appropriately placed on a homeowner who understands that as their responsibility from day one. Not to come to the board at the end of the day after this doomsday event that hasn't occurred in 20 years to date. I'm not going to go out on a limb and say that nothing terrible will occur within the next 20 years, but if we could look at the existing history as an example, I feel it's more appropriate to look at that annual maintenance of the basin. So those are some of my thoughts. Ultimately, I understand and I've heard and I recognize all the concerns that the board has shared. The Planning Commission shared them. The Zoning Hearing Board shared them. I've been before all 3 bodies. We've done communities like this elsewhere. We recognize the burden of responsibility on our part. And I'll give credit to this board that they've elevated this in our minds and on were a real priority issue to make sure that there's clarification. So I would like to ask that the board consider rescinding the motion to require the HOA first and foremost, and allow us through our attorney and the solicitor to work together to come up with a solution that ensures the township's concerns are addresses our concerns for the overall marketability of the community, and ideally provides us a solution that is beneficial to everyone.
May I ask questions? Thank you. So you talked about a wet signature. Is that one of the companion instruments that you were talking about being recorded?
Yes.
So that's going to be recorded with the plan. So it's been my past experience that homeowners and title companies don't refer to a plan when a house is being sold. Generally, only when the plan is being referred to is when somebody comes in for a building permit and, then our zoning officer would check, go back to that original plan, and it's usually your zoning officer that discovers any kind of stormwater issues on that plan that you can't build. So I personally find that the buyer, title company, don't go back to that plan to see those recorded documents. So,
I'm suggesting that this instrument be recorded with the deed, not with the plan.
and how do you ensure that happens every time there's a transfer of the deed? How can you
Because
guarantee that?
within the deed itself, I intend to reference this separate instrument, this restrictions and covenants instrument, and this ownership and maintenance instrument in the deed. I'm not suggesting that we refer to a plan that then refers to an instrument. I'm saying, I'm going to tell this buyer in plain language in the deed itself, you have a stormwater management basin.
Okay.
Associated with that stormwater management basin is instrument X, instrument Y. That includes the restrictions and covenants and the ownership and maintenance agreement.
And so that's what you're talking about, it's going to be embedded in the title?
Correct.
So define the word embedded to me, because I've seen where mentions of a stormwater maintenance facility has gotten dropped off the titles. And I don't know how that happens personally, but I've personally seen it. So when you say embedded, I'm not following what you're saying there, that that's a guarantee that will always remain there.
And that goes back again to what I was saying about the evolution of the legal preparation of these documents and the title work that's now put in place for mortgage companies and for landholders. So I'm suggesting just an excessive layer of redundancy within the deed, references within the legal description. Northeasting X, Y, west, containing a lot, 2.2 acres in size,
Okay.
also containing a stormwater management basin. Subsequently in the deed, a whereas clause or an also clause that references the document, another reference in the deed. I mean, I've heard your concerns, and I believe that there's a way to address them and do it properly so that we can ensure that all future parties, even with just a cursory title review or just reading a deed, there's clarity on who owns what.
Okay.
I'm not trying to push this off to a note buried on sheet 21 of a 40-page plan.
I appreciate you doing your homework and addressing these questions and, bringing these ideas to the board. As far as maintenance, you said that they would only have to mow a couple times a year, but what about the fence? They're also responsible for the fence around that. I don't know what that fence is made of. I don't know what the life expectancy of that fence is.
It's a split rail fence, pretty wide, pretty close split rail.
Yeah. And there again, every concern you've raised is valid. And I intend to fully engage the township to make sure that your concerns are addressed. And that's why I really want the attorneys, the people who are actually going to be crafting these documents to speak together and come up with a way. We have nothing to hide as far as this party buys that lot. And again, if it's the last lot sold and we're in there for 10 years until we can get rid of it, so be it. That's our burden that we have chosen to assume. But we're going to go to great lengths to make sure that it's clear, that your maintenance includes the fence, even though I omitted that when I was talking about the basin.
And then my last question that I would have, it would be, I'm sure your construction of this basin is going to be superb and up to standards, but as you well know, we have 100-year storms every 2 or 3 years now. So, and that seems to be the new norm, and that's going to continue happening. So given that, how much quicker is this basin going to wear down?
It's the accelerated aging.
That's correct?
It's the engineering accelerated aging
Yeah.
based on the conditions we currently have that Penny's asking, because
Yes.
if I may add to that real quickly, I believe I'm checking my notes here, I believe it was on Monday or Tuesday, Reading registered 5.8 or 5.9 inches of rain in 2 hours.
Right.
And 24 hours later, we got the remainder of that tropical storm which came up. So.
Right.
Well, that's what I'm saying, we're
Yeah, it's a
having a
big-
100-year storm every 2 or 3 years. So,
And this ordinance, the basin, as I said, the original basin was designed according to 2002 standards or 2000 standards. To your credit, you've both spoken, from what I saw in the video, to the point that DEP standards have evolved to the point where we are at 2020 standards. So this basin has been designed consistent with the stormwater management ordinance of the township as it exists today. It's been designed consistent with DEP guidelines as they exist today, which are, it all depends who you ask, I guess, but they're head and shoulders above the design standards that existed 20 years ago. The basin, consistent with those designs, is designed to handle storm events that happen in real time, happen according to today's frequency. And while I can't predict if we're going to have a 100-year storm every month for the near term, what I can say is that we've designed it consistent with the standards that's required and consistent with the safety standards that the state has set forth. So if the state is dictating that we design it for what I call these doomsday scenarios, and that's what they've established their standards to reflect, we've done that. I believe that we've addressed that issue.
And I don't think that's the question. My concern is, my concern really comes down to, it's the layman homeowner who buys that property. If it's an engineer who's buying that property, they're going to be held to a very different standard based on the deed and what they're buying and the full disclosure of that property itself. There's a big difference between an engineer or a PE purchasing that property versus an attorney versus a school teacher or someone who owns a small pizzeria. Okay? My concern on that is it really comes down to the carrying cost of maintaining that facility, and it comes down to another part of it, which is what's the enforcement of maintaining that facility, because there's a carrying cost there also. And what I mean by enforcement is what happens if the homeowner does not mow the lawn? What happens if the homeowner just lets it all grow to a point that they don't care what happens in the basement? What happens if the fencing then deteriorates? What happens? And now we get into a situation, how do you handle the enforcement? Right? So then the enforcement comes back to us. So the point is, the individual who's purchasing that property, I don't know, I'm still concerned. They truly don't understand the carrying costs. And it's not only the carrying costs, it's the ultimate responsibility they're taking as a burden onto themselves in terms of personal liability for that basin. When the benefactors for that basin are all of those homes in that area,
Right.
right?
Right.
You know, you mentioned something interesting, which was you said that you acknowledge, based on that property, you said, so be it, it could take 10 years to sell that property. Okay? So you're fully aware of the marketability impacts of that property, I'm sure.
Right.
That's your business,
Correct.
right? So if you know it's going to take 10 years, potentially a significant amount of time, whatever the number may be, to market that property, have you considered, and one of the questions we asked before was, have you considered just maintaining ownership of that property and not building a home on that lot?
I considered not building a home on that lot and offering it to the township for park dedication. The township considered
That passes the liability.
that. It also satisfies my park and rec obligation.
Fair answer.
So if the township's willing to consider that, that's something I would consider. I have thought about making an adjustment to the pipe that goes underneath of that's on the common property line, to put that on lot 11, so that there is no dispute down the line for common property owners on what level of deterioration or condition warrants improvement or replacement. But you mentioned a few things in your statement there. There's no guarantee that an attorney or an engineer will be on the HOA board when the HOA board is created. So there's still that naivete that may come along with just living in that community. And I live in a community that has an HOA that we actually just disbanded over in Manheim. I didn't really have a problem with it, but we didn't really have anything other than mowing grass. But the HOA did not mow the grass, and the township had to come out and force them to mow the grass. So if Joe homeowner, who's on lot 11, doesn't mow his grass, the same enforcement mechanism is in place if the HOA doesn't mow the grass, and there's no guarantee that they will. So I want to be sure to clarify that an HOA isn't a stopgap that I believe it may be perceived to be. It's an additional layer, I will give you that. But it's still human bodies on a board that, you know, they're up on the north side of Coach Drive or Surrey, and they're not even thinking about this basin down there. So, again, I hear everything that you're saying, and it's all very valid. And I'm not trying to dismiss any of it, but we can satisfy the concerns that you have. I believe that we can, without having to involve an HOA.
I guess one clarification sitting here and everything I've heard is, it's kind of like the stock market. Past performance is no indication of future returns or performance. So I would not want the board to rely on the statement that the existing basin has been there for an extended period of time, and likely therefore would be able to handle future events. The basin is being modified significantly. It's storing additional volume. The slope is being cut. So I call it, let's say, the stress on the basin. 35 additional homes, significant additional roads. So what flows to the basin today is not reflective of what will flow to the basin when it's done. Along the counter side to that is, yes, we're not dealing with the existing basin in the future. It's a modified basin in terms of clay liner, adjusted facilities, inspecting the outlet structure, doing all kinds of things to the basin, but at the same time, what's there today and what it's experiencing is not going to be what's there tomorrow or in the future, and what that future is experiencing. I just, also, if somebody listens to this tape in the future and says, they want to understand what the potentials are there, it is a basin in karst geology, so the clay liner is not there just for decoration. The clay liner is a measure to try to attempt to manage risks associated with karst limestone geology and storing water there and potential for sinkholes. Sometimes those efforts last forever, sometimes those efforts are unsuccessful in managing sinkholes. So in terms of not swaying one way or the other, just throwing facts out there and trying to make sure that information's accurate. And Joe did mention 30-inch pipe or the large pipe coming down between the property lines. That was previously part of the discussions relative to the basin and maintenance of private facilities. So anything that's decided would have to reflect the long-term maintenance of that 30-inch pipe, which is running along the property line.
See, your comments about the homeowner association, here's how I look at that. We have a homeowner association where we live. I believe our fee is $120 a year. It has not gone up. I believe it's been that way for 10, 12 years. I see the HOAs as an advantage. The reason I see those as an advantage is for the following reason. If there's a catastrophic event in this basin, and the homeowner who's there gets saddled with an solely responsible for the engineering, just the engineering costs alone, what could potentially happen is they're not going to do it, thereby affecting all those other homes anyway because of the outflow and the discharge to the basin. So they're going to negatively impact those homes no matter what, if they choose not to do it. Okay? If the HOA is there, what happens in that case is there's a negative event. The HOA then knows it has to manage their reserves in such a way to plan for such an event. Okay? And even if they don't have the reserves in place to manage for that event, there's the special assessment that they would put on all the homeowners. So when you go and spread X amount of dollars among 100, 200, 300 homes, it becomes a lot more manageable. There's an additional fact there that we have over at Quail Hollow, and that is the homeowners there, a lot of them have riders on their insurance policies, and those riders are specifically for special assessments that could occur. I have that rider on my policy at my house. So even if there's a special assessment because something catastrophic happens, we eliminate all of our reserves, and they do go to each home now for an additional X amount of dollars. It's covered under the insurance. Right? So I hear what you're saying about the HOA. I can also see it from the other side in terms of it's extremely beneficial. It's actually an investment, the way I look at it, for the other homeowners, because they're actually guaranteeing that their outflow, the water drainage, and everything that's occurring on their specific property, which may be 20 homes away from where this basin is actually getting maintained and executed properly. So those are my thoughts.
And then one more question about the deed. You said the deed description, you would be very redundant in repeating that over and over again. Who is it that reviews that deed? Does our solicitor review that language?
That's what I'm inviting, is that the solicitor be intimately involved
Okay.
in preparing that. Because again, as I've said many times, I'm not attempting to dismiss the township's concerns, and everything I'm hearing is valid. I'm trying to find a different way, and I want the township, through the solicitor, to be involved in that different way.
Yeah, I echo a lot of Mr. Carrasco's thoughts. I thought he spelled it out well from my perspective as well, as what I see there. And, you know, even if the deed thing can be straightened out and language acceptable put together, it still doesn't handle the maintenance problems we see in this basin. And, you know, my crystal ball doesn't show the next 30 or 40 years, but when you look at what's been happening in the past, regulations just keep getting more intense over the years. And perhaps someday there'll be mandated basin upgrades to this that will take it another step further from where it is today. And, you know, that just, to put all that on one homeowner, it could lead to just problems that, for everybody, township, future boards here, and everybody else. Spreading that risk over 35 houses there makes a lot of sense to me. You know, we just don't know where we're going with this in the future. And one person, we've seen it in the past with one person, they can get overwhelmed with that. You know, I've heard of that situation even in surrounding townships, other townships where, you know, somebody's bought a house where the basin is, and man, they want out of it after a while once they realize what they're in. Your language there could satisfy that some ways, but, you know, it still doesn't take the burden off of one person. And I think that's what we were trying to do with that, you know, create the homeowners association. You're creating a lot more impervious there with the streets, the houses, and it's gonna put a different load on that basin than what currently was, or is. So, you know, if you can figure a way through all that, I think, you know, I'd be receptive, but I don't know what it is.
And that's the only thing that I really need is the opportunity to look at this and come up with a different way. If at the end of the day, we can't come up with a solution that works for you and addresses your concerns, and so be it. I just want a little more time, and I'd like for the board to just be open and consider some options. If possible, I'd like to ask that you authorize your solicitor to speak with my attorney. We work with McNeese Wallace. I think you might have met our attorney when we were going through zoning, but you know, I'd like to ask that the board not take action on the plan today. And I realize that we're coming up against the deadline for action, which I think is the end of the month. So I can grant an extension on action. This is my request that you do this. And I don't issue this recklessly because we want to start. You know, we've already cleared the site. We had a pre-con meeting. You know, we wanted to start moving dirt 2 weeks ago. So this is a choice that we've made to just sit on this for a bit, try to work something out. There's an inevitable end here that we're all headed towards. We'll get to it, but let's keep talking if we can.
Well, is there other ideas on the maintenance end of this? I mean, what else could it be?
I mean, there's things that we've kicked around as far as either escrows or insurance. But again,
Well, we talked about that at the last meeting, I think. What's enough?
well, we have a number that's been assessed by, or been reviewed by Becker for the cost opinion for the basin itself. So I mean, that's at least the number to start with. I'm not saying that's the number, but
What do we know in 20 years from now? 30 years? This house will be there a long
I
time.
agree. I agree.
Yeah.
But you said where do we start? We at least have a start.
Yeah, okay.
Well,
I
I think we can look at it.
Sure.
Yeah.
If the two attorneys could get together and do a
Yeah.
draft deed, that we could see that language and the redundancy of that.
Yeah.
I'm not an attorney and I don't know, but, you know, you said about escrow accounts, could something like that be set up? And then these new homeowners purchasing these 30 new homeowners, I don't know, each pitch in $5,000 to go into that escrow account. That's $150,000 to repair that basin down the road. I'm just throwing stuff out there. I don't know what can be done.
That's what I'm doing as well, just throwing stuff out there.
Yeah.
So we
So,
can look at it. I think the board is
But-
able to look at it, something else.
Yeah.
Jim, you want to say something?
Yeah, I live in Rose Hill, and we do not have a homeowners association, and I'm thankful that we don't. When we needed to redo the island that was put in our development, we went around to every homeowner in the development, and everybody chipped in to redo that island. I think there's a lot of pride in our development, especially because there are a majority of the homes are owned by the homeowners that live in them, that they aren't rented out in mass numbers. I feel that if there's a rider on an insurance policy that people can get, wouldn't that rectify a lot of this situation? And if there's future regulations, aren't they grandfathered?
No.
No. Not necessarily, sorry.
Well, just looking at the amount of water on Church Street at that supposed park we have. Yesterday I rode by, not on purpose, but I rode by and I saw that the porta-johns were up against a tree. What do we do for our own property to rectify flooding?
No.
You know, I'm not talking about Reedstown Park.
Fishing
I'm talking
Creek,
about the property.
Fishing Creek Park, yeah.
That is a
That's
poor
awful.
excuse
That's
if
a
you ask me
floodplain.
for a park.
That entire park, just for your information, June, that entire park, or a very good percentage of it is in the floodplain.
Yes.
So it's designed to do exactly what it's doing,
Has been in the floodplain forever.
forever.
But what do we do to rectify it so that people don't get injured when it is flooded? I mean, I'm just saying that that's something that needs to be considered regarding what this gentleman is talking about.
It's actually, the current stormwater regulations are attempting to prevent further impacts from flooding downstream. So
Yeah.
that's why these higher standards, that's why this basin will store more water than other basins that meet current standards. So the deadline for action is the 27th, the next board meeting
The
is
20th.
20th. So no action necessary relative to extending the time now. If it has to be done in the future, it could be acknowledging a time extension at the next meeting. So I guess the remaining question would be, do you want action on the cost opinion at this time, or you hold off on that until everything's handled?
No, I'd like you to take action on that. We can get that in place. We're moving ahead.
Right.
We're absolutely moving ahead.
I noticed that.
And I think that it's going to be a great product for the township, and we're very thrilled and proud to be involved in it. So I'd like to get that motion on that, on the cost opinion, so we can get the bonds in place and for a letter of credit, whatever it might be.
That's of course conditioned upon the plan changes resulting from whatever is being discussed, but I don't anticipate that, and I assume we don't.
Yes, I agree. I would like that motion.
Maybe before that motion, the other question would be relative to the determination of the required fee in lieu of park open space dedication. To date, nothing's been provided to the township. You have that information that can also be reviewed so that we don't address one item and then have a dispute in the future over an amount or something, trying to head all that off.
I have an appraisal. I will again reiterate that the township's open to accepting dedication, a lot of letters.
Thank you very
Look at that song, Beautiful River, just keeps popping in my head.
I'll put a top lot on it. It'll look really nice. So, does that require a motion?
Thank you very much.
Why not?
So you'll forward that to it?
I would consider that if landmark permanently maintained it.
I just want to acknowledge that that value has to be determined acceptable by the board.
Yeah.
Right,
Mhm.
for
Yeah.
future motions.
Mhm.
And I guess it's based on all that discussion, the recommended motion as outlined in the report is to acknowledge the required amount of financial security to be established with the township for Carriage Hill Phase 3 and 4, preliminary final subdivision plan in the amount of $1,888,151.96 per the approved construction cost opinion prepared by Dave Miller Associates, Inc., dated February 6, 2020, revised July 30th, 2020.
Okay, I'll make that motion.
I'll second that.
Any comments or questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you.
The only other item to note is that we still also have outstanding agreements to be worked out between the township and the applicant relative to use of the temporary construction access, the duration of that, when it can be terminated, and long-term maintenance of, or mitigation of any impacts to adjacent township roadways and other items as outlined in the prior review.
Brian, real quick on that. When I was reading through everything in preparation for today, I noted on sheet 21 of the land development plan, note number 12, lots 1 and 11 shall not be constructed with the other lots. Lot 11 may be constructed once the basin has been fully stabilized. Lot 1, which is the construction access, can only be constructed once all other work in the site has been completed and the area is stabilized. Do you feel as though that note satisfies your concerns?
I guess the contradiction is with note 16 on sheet 1,
Okay.
which states that temporary access has to remain in place until roadway base.
So if I move that note from the stormwater management plan to sheet 1, do you feel as though that satisfies?
Well, I think ultimately, the decision on what's satisfactory is based on the board's decision, but it's headed in the right direction. Yeah, it was construction note 19. Construction access to the site shall be limited to the entrance from Ridge Avenue into Lot 1. No traffic shall access the site through the existing neighborhood roads. The access shall remain in place until the bulk grading has been completed and all streets are paved to the base course, which, when you typically no homes have been constructed at that point, so.
I agree.
And that's on the first sheet of the recorded plan, which is,
There's some clarification needs to be done.
yeah, ultimately, I think it needs to be added to a single agreement that addresses that access issue satisfactory to the board, in addition to things that we've experienced elsewhere, like in Heatherwood, where people haven't abided by the intended routes and who's responsible for those impacts, and also the maintenance of this dedicated portion of the roadway where the temporary cul-de-sac will be removed and potentially causing complications for township maintenance of a dead-end section of dedicated road with existing residents residing on it. And these are all manageable issues, it's just making sure that the nod is given by the board that what's being proposed is acceptable.
Understood.
I guess motion to table the plan, and that would be the appropriate motion.
Okay.
I've taken up enough of your time, thank you.
Okay,
And I'll make that motion to table.
I'll second it. Any comments or questions? All in favor, say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carried. Thank you.
And Joe, you did authorize for the two solicitors to get the advertising?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thanks a lot, I'll see you guys again soon.
Yep, thanks.
Next item, WEH Enterprise LP, preliminary final land development plan. This is projects completed and release of remaining securities. Tony and Casey Kirshner from our office and Tim McCray met on site, did the typical coordination, closeout of a project and discussed long-term maintenance of stormwater facilities, obligations for reporting. Based on the conditions found, there were minor items that will need to be monitored. The township has agreed to work with the applicant to continue to monitor those items. So the motion would be to motion to authorize full release of the current financial security being held by the township for the WEH Enterprise LP preliminary final land development plan in the amount of $12,148.59.
Anybody here representing that?
I did not expect it.
Okay. I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Any comments or questions? All in favor, say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carried. Thank you.
I guess I'll give a little intro to the next item was Zimmerman Townhouse Tract, which was a concept plan that was submitted to the township and discussed during the pre-application meeting, and there was, I guess as a result of some of those discussions, a request to follow up with the board relative to the concept and potential need for certain support before everything will proceed in any way, or that the applicant has some understanding of where the board stands relative to their proposal. So with that said, I'll turn it over to Bill Schwarnick from Dave Miller.
Good morning, I am Bill Schwarnick with Dave Miller Associates. With me also is White and Brian Zimmerman, representing the applicant. I appreciate the opportunity to come up and talk with you about this. This is a 75-acre tract of land that this applicant, the property is owned by Roy Zimmerman, the gentleman's father. They would like to establish on the north side of the existing railroad right-of-way a townhouse project. The property to the south is currently zoned industrial, and what they'd like to do is primarily and solely have townhouses on this property. There are a couple of units that would function as semi-detached dwelling units, but in general, it would be a townhouse development that would be, the property would be held in common. There would not be a subdivision. The properties would be available for rental. And as Brett had mentioned, we had met at the pre-application meeting. We went into the discussion with an understanding that we were not compliant with some of the criteria relative to the mixture and makeup of the unit types, but their interest is primarily to allow for the establishment of townhouses, and wanted to get your feedback relative to how you viewed this property in terms of the context of the other housing that is located adjacent to the property. We did also stop out at Wabash Landing, is that the name correct? Because that had been mentioned at our pre-application meeting as an example of the objectives and the goal for the community relative to the mixture of housing and kind of the breakup of the spaces, the size of the spaces, and the areas that would be left for the residents to occupy and enjoy. So just to kind of, I guess, give a broad, this is zone R3. Loosely, we are compliant with the criteria relative to the overlay. That overlay, the traditional or the village overlay zone requirements require a mixture of dwelling units, and as such, we would not be compliant with that because we are proposing 100% of the units to be townhouses. Again, the property is situated, it's kind of somewhat of an oddly shaped property. It's got a narrow section, again, as a restriction from the railroad right-of-way. It has frontage along Weaver and along Line Road. There are existing single-family dwellings located to the east, to the west.
West.
Thank you. And then this is an existing church with its space here. These are further single-family houses to the east. We are proposing to be compliant with all the parking criteria, the open space criteria. There would be sidewalks throughout. We had talked about some improvements along Line Road and along Weaver Road as it relates to connecting this to the community. It was brought up that there would really be an interest to have a pedestrian connection to the school, which we would connect into the pedestrian network that is out there. Brian and White prepared an exhibit that would show representatively a representation of what the units would look like. This is a standard representation of what the units would look like. There would be on-surface parking. The parking would be contained behind the dwelling units and not, out along. There would be no access directly to parking spaces from the adjacent roadways. We are proposing the primary entrance off of Weaver Road with possibility for secondary emergency accesses off of Line Road. There was some discussion at our pre-application meeting that perhaps this would need to be, the one entrance would perhaps need to be a functional permitted entrance, and we could consider that. The site would be served by public sewer and water. There would need to be some grading to allow for a gravity sewer system to extend up into this area. And then one other, I guess, complication of the use of the lot is there's an existing overhead power line that crosses on the western side of the property, or southern side of the property. A little turned around here. Really what we wanted to get your feedback on was whether or not the board thought that townhouses would be an appropriate use in this area. Options for allowing this to continue with this in this way would be to ask for relief of the criteria of the ordinance or present to the board a alternative for the R3 zoning district. Right now we're proceeding under the overlay criteria. If the board is not opposed to it, we would like to perhaps as an option present the opportunity to provide an alternative use, permitted use within the R3 zoning district. My review of the R3 districts within the township, it's very limited. As a matter of fact, I don't know if there are other areas of R3 land that are available for development. I think most of the land that is zoned R3 has been developed, or it's limited. And as such, it would really be, this property would be the property, unless changes in the future to the R3 zoning would occur, this would really be the only property that would fall into that category, as opposed to making changes to the overlay would impact a significantly greater area of residential housing that you have within your community. So that's what we wanted to present, is that, and get your feedback on how you view this property. We feel the contextual setting here lends itself to this type of use. It is a transition area to the industrial land that's adjacent, and it would provide for a nice community with open space that is adjacent to roadways that don't go through other residential neighborhoods. We felt it was a good location for the presentation of this use, and really wanted to get your feedback on it.
I guess maybe just to supplement and clarify, obviously it's impossible for us to summarize everything discussed at the pre-application meeting without taking up extensive portions of your time. He did state loosely comply with the village overlay. That's an interesting way to phrase it, I guess, but the concern expressed by the township staff was that if you look at the intent of the village overlay, which can be applied to any of the residential zones from the traditional, any of the, not the rural residential, but traditional suburban and mixed resident, it can be utilized anywhere as long as you meet certain criteria relative to acreage and other things. So if you look in that village overlay, and Wabash, Foxbrook was an example, but has fallen to the wayside, but Wabash is the current example of what the village overlay and the ordinance wording states is intended, and that is mimic a village concept. It states multiple times mixed housing types, which means singles, townhouses, semis, and potential apartments. Throughout the development, create a streetscape with parallel parking and access to the rear dwellings through alleys and other things. So when you look at this, the staff's concern is that it's a stretch to call it a village overlay, and then potentially invalidates future village overlay controls, I guess. Anybody else can come in and say, no, I want to do all whatever singles, I want to do all something else. That once you open that door to this level of creativity relative to the village overlay, you have to realize what you're doing. And that's why these other options, as far as they express, well, their interest isn't to have a mixed housing type. They are interested in townhouses, and then what is another way to potentially do that if this parcel, this location, and this density is considered appropriate